It all began on a sweltering summer afternoon when Jamal, a hard-working father of two, was cleaning out the attic of his small, rundown house. His wife had been pestering him for weeks to declutter, especially since they'd been struggling to make ends meet. As he sifted through old boxes, the mundane task quickly turned into something extraordinary. In the bottom of a forgotten drawer, buried under a decade's worth of dust, Jamal stumbled upon a crumpled lottery ticket, a piece of paper that had slipped his mind long ago. It wasn't just any ticket. As he scanned the numbers on it, a shiver ran down his spine. Could this be the break he desperately needed? Jamal knew he had to confirm the numbers, but something inside him froze. It wasn't disbelief, it was fear. He'd spent years of his life working multiple jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, and suddenly, here in his hands, was a ticket that might change everything. But could something this good really happen to him? 2. Background. Introducing Jamal and his world. Jamal had never been one for luck. Born and raised in a tough part of the city, he'd learned early on that life wasn't going to hand him anything for free. The streets of his neighborhood were lined with the dreams of men who had tried and failed to make it out. Men who, like Jamal, had once believed they could change their fate. But Jamal was different. He had his wife, Tanya, who stood by him no matter how hard things got. He had 2 kids, Marcus and Jada, who looked up to him like he was their hero. Though Jamal worked long hours at a warehouse job during the day and delivered groceries at night, his family barely scraped by. The bills piled up. Their old car broke down constantly. His children wore second-hand clothes to school, and every meal was a careful balancing act between cost and nutrition. The struggle was relentless, but Jamal refused to let it crush him. Every morning, he got up, kissed his wife, and promised himself he'd find a way to give his kids a better life. The lottery had always been a distant dream, the kind of hope you cling to on the darkest days. Every now and then, he'd buy a ticket, but never with any real expectation of winning. The lottery was for other people, people with luck, people who had the world's blessings. And so when Jamal found this ticket buried in his attic, he felt a rush of emotions: excitement, anxiety, disbelief. But he couldn't shake the idea that maybe, just maybe, this ticket was different. 3. Setting the scene. Life in the community. Jamal's neighborhood wasn't all bad. It had character, the kind of place where people looked out for each other because they knew the world outside wasn't always kind. There was Miss Dolores, who ran the corner store and treated Jamal's kids like her own. There was Big Mike, the retired boxer, who hosted neighborhood barbecues every summer to keep the kids out of trouble. And then there was Old Man Willie, who'd lived through it all, and often warned the younger generation about chasing pipe dreams. But there was also the struggle. The local factory had shut down years ago, taking most of the good jobs with it. Crime had crept in, and a sense of hopelessness seemed to hang over the streets. People were tired. They were tired of working hard and getting nowhere, tired of politicians making promises they never kept. And yet, amidst the poverty, there was a sense of resilience, an unspoken agreement that they would stick together no matter what. Jamal was part of this community, respected and loved for his quiet strength and unwavering commitment to his family. People knew him as the guy who never gave up, even when life knocked him down time and time again. But now, with this ticket in hand, Jamal wondered if his life was about to take a turn. And if it did, how would it affect the people around him? Would they celebrate his good fortune, or would envy creep in? 4. Character introduction. The family. Jamal's wife, Tanya, had always been his rock. She was a teacher at the local elementary school, shaping young minds and keeping their home afloat with her steady, if modest, paycheck. Tanya was the kind of woman who saw the good in everyone and everything. Even when things were at their hardest, she managed to find a reason to smile. It was her strength that had kept Jamal going during the darkest times, and he knew that if anyone deserved a better life, it was her. Marcus, their 14-year-old son, was starting to feel the weight of their struggles. He was a bright kid, full of potential, but the constant pressure of growing up poor was beginning to show. He wanted to help his dad, to contribute in some way, but Jamal always told him his job was to focus on school. Jeddah, their 10-year-old daughter, was more carefree, still blissfully unaware of just how tight things were financially. Her innocence was both a blessing and a burden to Jamal, who feared the day she'd realize just how tough life could be. As Jamal stared at the lottery ticket, his mind raced. He saw visions of a new house, new clothes for the kids, a car that didn't break down every other week. But then, just as quickly, those visions were replaced by doubt. What if this was all a cruel joke? What if the ticket wasn't worth anything? What if the lottery numbers didn't match? He hadn't even checked them yet. But something inside him whispered that this was his moment. He had to act. He had to know. It was supposed to be just another Saturday. Jamal had planned to spend the afternoon cleaning up the attic, not because he wanted to, but because Tanya had reminded him for the 100th time that they needed more space. The old house they'd inherited from Jamal's father was small, cramped, and full of memories they didn't have the heart to throw away. Every corner was cluttered with mementos, boxes of toys from when Marcus and Jada were toddlers, Jamal's old high school football trophies, and albums stuffed with faded photographs of relatives who had long since passed. As the sun beat down relentlessly outside, the attic was stifling. Dust swirled in the air as Jamal opened old boxes, shifting through items he hadn't looked at in years. He sighed, thinking how much easier it would be to just leave everything as it was. But he knew better. Tanya had been patient, and he couldn't keep putting it off. He wasn't expecting to find anything valuable up there. It was just old junk, stuff they'd been too sentimental to throw away. But as he moved a pile of old magazines, his hand brushed against something crinkly. It felt like paper, but thicker. Jamal pulled it out and found himself staring at an old yellowing lottery ticket. His first instinct was to laugh. It couldn't possibly be worth anything. He'd bought that ticket years ago during one of those weeks when the lottery jackpot had climbed to an astronomical sum. He'd picked up the ticket on a whim, like so many other people who had dreams of winning big but never did. The ticket had probably gotten lost in the shuffle of life, forgotten and abandoned like so many other lottery tickets before it. But this time, something was different. Jamal held the ticket in his hand, and a strange feeling washed over him. He couldn't shake the thought that this ticket was special. There was something about it, something that made his heart race just a little faster. With the ticket in his hand, Jamal hesitated. Part of him didn't want to check the numbers. What were the chances, really? It was like 1 in a million. No, 1 in a billion. That this crumpled piece of paper was worth anything. And yet, a tiny voice in the back of his mind urged him to check, just in case. He grabbed his phone from his pocket, hands slightly trembling, and searched for the old lottery results from the date printed on the ticket. As the website loaded, Jamal's mind wandered. He pictured what life would be like if the numbers matched. A new house, a decent car, a chance to send his kids to college without worrying about money. He imagined Tanya's face when he told her the news, the joy in her eyes, the relief that would wash over them both. The page finally loaded. Jamal stared at the numbers on the screen, then glanced down at the ticket in his hand. His heart skipped a beat. The first number matched. He checked again. The second number was the same too. His breath caught in his throat as he scanned the rest of the numbers. Slowly, methodically, he compared each one to the ticket he held in his shaking hands. All the numbers matched. Jamal's knees buckled. He sat down hard on the dusty floor of the attic, unable to process what he was seeing. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of mistake. But the numbers didn't lie. The ticket he'd forgotten about all these years was worth millions. For a long moment, Jamal just sat there, staring at the ticket. He blinked, half expecting the numbers to change, or for the whole thing to be some kind of dream. But the numbers stayed the same. Slowly, the realization started to sink in. He was holding a winning lottery ticket, Not just any winning ticket, but one worth millions of dollars. A rush of emotions flooded Jamal's mind. Disbelief, excitement, fear, and doubt, all crashing together in a chaotic storm. He'd never been the kind of person to believe in miracles. But this was something else. He felt a surge of adrenaline, followed by an almost paralyzing sense of dread. What if it wasn't real? What if he'd misread the numbers? What if there was some mistake, and all this excitement was for nothing? He needed to confirm it. He needed to be absolutely sure. But the idea of calling someone or going down to the lottery office terrified him. What if someone tried to take it from him? What if he got scammed? He'd heard stories about people who won the lottery only to lose everything because they trusted the wrong people. Jamal's mind raced as he considered his options. He could go to the local convenience store where he bought the ticket and ask them to scan it, but he didn't trust anyone there not to talk. News like this would spread like wildfire in his neighborhood, and the last thing he wanted was to draw attention to himself before he was ready. 4. Telling Tanya. Jamal knew there was only one person he could trust with something like this. Tanya. She was at work, wrapping up a long day at the elementary school where she taught 3rd grade. He could imagine her now, patiently helping a student with a math problem, her soft voice offering encouragement. He debated whether to call her at work or wait until she got home, but the excitement bubbling up inside him was too much to contain. He needed to hear her voice, to share this moment with her. He dialed her number, his heart pounding in his chest. After a few rings, she answered. "Hey babe, what's up? I'm still at school, but I'll be home in about an hour." Jamal took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. "Tanya, I think I found something. Something big." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What do you mean? Something big?" Jamal's mouth went dry. He wasn't sure how to put it into words. "You remember that lottery ticket I bought a few years ago? The one we forgot about?" Tanya laughed softly. "Yeah, I remember. What about it?" "I found it," Jamal said, his voice shaking. "And I think it's a winner. I checked the numbers, and they all match." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Jamal, are you serious?" "I'm serious, Tanya. It's real. I think we just won millions." Tanya was silent for a moment, trying to process what Jamal had just said. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. "I double-checked the numbers," Jamal said. "They match. I'm looking at the ticket right now." Tanya let out a shaky breath. "Oh my God, Jamal. Do you know what this means? We could finally get out of here. We could give the kids the life we've always dreamed of." Jamal's heart swelled at the sound of her excitement, but a part of him still felt uneasy. This was all happening so fast, and the weight of the ticket in his hand felt heavier than he'd expected. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We could, but we need to be careful. We can't tell anyone yet. Not until we figure out what to do next." Tanya agreed, her tone suddenly more serious. "You're right. We need to think this through. But Jamal, this could change everything." The night after Jamal found the winning lottery ticket, sleep was elusive. He tossed and turned, his mind racing with possibilities, doubts, and fears. His humble bedroom, which once felt like a sanctuary, now felt suffocating. The soft hum of the ceiling fan did little to calm his nerves, and every creak of the old house seemed amplified in the silence of the night. Beside him, Tanya slept fitfully, occasionally stirring as if sensing the seismic shift that was about to shake their world. The ticket was tucked inside a shoebox in their closet, but Jamal couldn't stop thinking about it. It felt like a time bomb, waiting, ticking, and threatening to explode. What had once been just a scrap of paper now held the weight of the world. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what the money represented: freedom, change, risk, and uncertainty. By morning, his anxiety had only grown. The longer he kept the ticket hidden, the more vulnerable he felt. What if someone found out? What if something happened to the ticket before they claimed it? What if in the excitement he had made a mistake and the numbers didn't actually match? His life had been one of struggle and perseverance, and the thought of having everything at his fingertips terrified him almost as much as it excited him. As the sun streamed through the blinds, casting long shadows across the bedroom, Jamal realized that keeping this secret between him and Tanya wasn't sustainable. They needed a plan. They couldn't just claim the winnings without thinking things through. 2. Tanya's proposal. Later that morning, Tanya sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and staring at the small note she had scribbled the lottery numbers on. Her eyes were wide, still processing the reality that their life could change forever. She placed the cup down, staring out of the window at the neighborhood they'd called home for years. There was a mixture of excitement and trepidation in her voice when she finally spoke. "We need to be smart about this, Jamal," she said, her tone serious but gentle. "This kind of money, it can ruin people if they're not careful. Look at what happened to that guy from down the street a few years ago when he won the scratch-off. It didn't take long before his family fell apart, and now he's gone." Jamal nodded. He remembered that story all too well. The man, Carl, had won a modest sum, nothing compared to what they were looking at, but enough to cause friction with his family. Within months, he had lost the money, alienated his children, and become a shadow of the person he once was. "We need a plan," Tanya continued, her voice firm. "We can't just rush out and claim the prize like it's no big deal. We need to be discreet, get professional advice, maybe even move before anyone finds out." Jamal admired how practical Tanya was, even in the face of such life-changing news. She always had her feet on the ground, even when his head was in the clouds. Still, the idea of keeping such a monumental secret felt suffocating to him. They would need help, but who could they trust? 3. Seeking advice. Jamal and Tanya decided that they needed to consult someone who had experience dealing with large sums of money. Neither of them had ever even dreamed of handling millions, and the last thing they wanted was to lose it all through poor decisions or by falling victim to a scam. But the question of trust loomed large. How could they share this news without it spreading like wildfire? That afternoon, they made a discreet visit to a man who had always seemed like a safe bet for honest advice, Mr. Johnson, a retired banker who lived down the block. He had lived in the neighborhood for as long as anyone could remember, always keeping to himself but maintaining a reputation for integrity. Jamal and Tanya had once borrowed a small sum from him during a rough patch, and he had never mentioned it to anyone, not even their closest neighbors. If anyone could guide them without letting the secret slip, it was Mr. Johnson. Sitting in his modest living room, surrounded by old books and faded photos, Jamal felt a knot form in his stomach. He could barely keep his voice steady as he told Mr. Johnson the story, how he'd found the forgotten lottery ticket, how the numbers had matched, and how their lives were about to change. Tanya sat beside him, gripping his hand tightly. Mr. Johnson listened carefully, his wise old eyes never leaving Jamal's face. When Jamal finished, the elderly man leaned back in his chair and let out a long, thoughtful sigh. "You're smart to come to me before doing anything rash," Mr. Johnson said, his voice gravelly but steady. "I've seen people who come into big money without a plan, and more often than not, they lose it just as fast as they got it. Money like this, it can make you, or it can break you. But it's not just the money you need to think about, it's the people around you." Jamal nodded. He had thought about the community, the friends, the neighbors who had supported him through tough times. He wasn't sure how they would react when they found out about his sudden fortune. "Here's what I suggest," Mr. Johnson continued. "Don't claim the prize right away. Take some time to get your affairs in order. Hire a lawyer, someone who specializes in this kind of thing. And don't tell anyone else, no matter how close you think they are. The more people who know, the harder it'll be to keep control of the situation." 4. The life-altering decision. Armed with Mr. Johnson's advice, Jamal and Tanya realized they had a monumental decision to make. They had to decide how they wanted to live the rest of their lives, whether they wanted to hold on to the life they had always known, or step into a completely different world filled with unknowns. For Jamal, the thought of leaving their community, their home, and the people they had grown up with was daunting. His identity was wrapped up in this neighborhood, in the shared struggles of the people who lived there. What would it mean to leave all of that behind? Tanya, on the other hand, saw the lottery as an opportunity, a chance to give their children a better life. She had always been the pragmatic one, and she knew that staying in their current environment might not be the best choice. "We've worked hard for years, Jamal," she said softly, her hand resting on his arm. "This could be our way out. We don't have to live like this anymore." Jamal felt torn. He wanted to give his family everything they deserved, but the thought of turning his back on the people who had helped shape him felt like a betrayal. They had been through so much together, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to say goodbye to the life he had known for so long. As the weight of the decision pressed down on him, Jamal realized that there was no easy answer. The ticket represented a choice between the life they had and the life they could have. It was a crossroads, a moment in time that would define their future. And no matter which path they chose, there would be no turning back. 5. The pressure of secrecy. As days turned into weeks, the secret became harder to keep. The constant pressure of knowing they were sitting on a multi-million-dollar fortune while pretending everything was normal began to weigh heavily on Jamal and Tanya. They attended community events, met with friends, and went about their daily routines, all the while hiding the biggest secret of their lives. At night, they whispered in hushed tones, planning their next steps. Should they move out of the neighborhood? Should they tell their children? Marcus was old enough to sense that something was going on, and he had started asking questions that Jamal and Tanya found harder to answer. Their lives had already changed, even though they hadn't claimed the money yet. They were living in a limbo, caught between the life they had always known and the unimaginable life that lay just beyond their reach. Every decision felt heavy, fraught with implications they couldn't fully understand. The longer they waited, the more intense the pressure became. 6. The decision made. After weeks of agonizing over the decision, Jamal and Tanya finally came to a resolution. They would take Mr. Johnson's advice, hire a lawyer, and quietly claim the prize without drawing attention. But they wouldn't rush into anything. They would be careful, strategic, and thoughtful about how they used the money. They would move, but not too far, just enough to give their family the space and security they needed, but close enough to stay connected to the people they cared about. As Jamal made the final decision to step into this new chapter of their lives, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but for the first time in his life, he felt like he had a choice, a real choice, about how his future would unfold. A week after their conversation with Mr. Johnson, Jamal and Tanya decided to take the first cautious steps toward claiming their fortune. They followed his advice, hiring a reputable lawyer who specialized in handling lottery winnings discreetly. Meeting in a downtown office far from their neighborhood, they signed papers that would set everything in motion. The lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Monica Reyes, was professional and reassuring. She guided them through the complex process of claiming the prize through a trust, ensuring their names wouldn't be made public. This would protect them from immediate attention, both from the press and anyone looking to take advantage of their windfall. "We'll handle everything quietly," Monica said, her calm demeanor putting Jamal at ease. "The trust will be in place within a few days, and once that's done, the funds will be transferred to an account under the trust's name. You'll have access to it, but your personal details won't be part of any public record. You'll want to take your time deciding what to do with the money. For now, don't make any sudden moves. Let the dust settle." Jamal and Tanya exchanged a relieved glance. The weight of the secret was heavy, but they felt they were finally on solid ground. They weren't rushing into anything. They were playing it smart. Still, they knew their lives were about to change in ways they couldn't fully predict. 2. A subtle shift in their world. At first, life seemed to continue as normal. The kids went to school, Jamal went to work, and Tanya kept teaching. But despite their efforts to keep things the same, the world around them started to feel different. It wasn't just the money itself that changed things, but the knowledge that they had it. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a quiet tension that colored every decision. They began making small, subtle changes, testing the waters before diving headfirst into their new reality. Tanya traded in her worn-out car for something newer, not extravagant, just enough to blend in while still making her daily commute less of a struggle. Jamal upgraded his tools at work, using a bit of the money to make his job as a mechanic more efficient. These were things they'd needed for years, things they had always put off because they couldn't afford them. Now they could, and it felt strange to do so without hesitation. But even as they tried to remain inconspicuous, people around them started to notice. Tanya's coworkers at the school commented on her new car, teasing her about finally treating herself. Jamal's colleagues at the garage raised an eyebrow at his sudden influx of new gear, joking that he must have hit the jackpot. "Just making a few upgrades," Jamal said with a casual shrug. But inside, he felt a pang of worry. He and Tanya had been careful, but it was impossible to keep the change entirely hidden. 3. Marcus's suspicions. At home, Marcus was the first to sense that something was going on. At 15, he was sharp and observant, always picking up on the smallest details. He noticed the way his parents whispered to each other in the evenings, the way they seemed both relieved and anxious at the same time. "Dad, what's going on?" Marcus asked one evening after dinner. "Something's different. Did you get a raise or something?" Jamal froze for a moment, trying to think of how to respond without giving away too much. He had always prided himself on being open with his kids, but this was different. This was a secret that could put them all in danger if it got out too soon. Well, yeah, sort of," Jamal said, trying to keep his tone light. "Your mom and I have been working hard, and we got a little extra saved up now. Nothing huge, just enough to make things a bit easier." Marcus didn't seem entirely convinced, but he didn't press the issue. Still, Jamal could see the wheels turning in his son's mind. He knew Marcus would keep watching, keep observing, and it wouldn't be long before he started asking more questions. The thought made Jamal uneasy. How much longer could they keep this under wraps? Despite their best efforts to remain discreet, the changes in Jamal and Tanya's lives didn't go unnoticed in their tight-knit community. They lived in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other's business, where even the smallest details could become the subject of speculation. So when Jamal's coworkers at the garage started noticing his new tools, and Tanya's colleagues at the school talked about her new car, whispers began to spread. It started small, as these things often do. A neighbor across the street, Mrs. Carter, noticed the delivery of a new flat-screen TV to the house. She mentioned it casually to her friend, Mrs. Jenkins, during their weekly coffee catch-up. Mrs. Jenkins, in turn, mentioned it to her husband, who worked at the local hardware store, and before long, the entire block was buzzing with quiet curiosity. "Did you hear about Jamal and Tanya? They'd been upgrading everything lately. I wonder if they came into some money. Maybe they won the lottery or something. You know how it goes. One day you're struggling, and the next, you're living large." The rumors were small at first, just idle gossip among neighbors. But Jamal and Tanya could feel the shift. People were watching them more closely, their smiles a little more curious, their questions a little more probing. It was only a matter of time before someone figured out the truth. 5. The unexpected twist. One evening, as Jamal was locking up the garage after a long day, he noticed a car parked across the street. It wasn't anyone he recognized. An older sedan with tinted windows. He brushed it off at first, thinking it might belong to a friend of a neighbor. But when he saw the same car parked in the same spot the next day, his gut instinct told him something was wrong. For the next week, the car appeared on and off, always in different locations near their house, but never too far away. Jamal's unease grew, and he confided in Tanya one night, the tension in his voice unmistakable. "I think someone's watching us," he said quietly, glancing out the window. "There's a car that keeps showing up, parked just down the street. I don't like it, Tanya. What if someone found out?" Tanya's face paled. "You don't think?" She didn't need to finish her sentence. The fear they had been keeping at bay for weeks finally surfaced. The thought of being targeted because of their newfound wealth was terrifying. That night, Jamal took a flashlight and went outside to confront the driver of the mysterious car. But when he reached the spot where the car had been parked, it was gone. His heart raced as he walked back to the house, scanning the shadows for any signs of movement. He felt exposed, vulnerable, and for the first time since finding the ticket, he wondered if claiming the prize had been a mistake. 6. Tensions rise. As the days passed, the tension in Jamal and Tanya's household continued to grow. They had always been a strong team, facing life's challenges together, but the weight of the secret and the fear that came with it was starting to take its toll. Tanya became more withdrawn, her usual warmth and optimism dulled by the constant worry. She started second-guessing every decision they made, from what groceries to buy to whether they should attend neighborhood events. Every interaction felt like a potential threat, every friendly smile hiding the possibility of someone who knew too much. Jamal, too, was struggling. He found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, unable to relax even in his own home. The pressure of keeping the secret from their kids, their friends, and their community was eating away at him, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could hold it together. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Jamal and Tanya sat at the kitchen table in silence. The weight of everything they had been holding inside finally came crashing down. "We can't live like this, Jamal," Tanya whispered, her voice breaking. "This money, it was supposed to help us, to make our lives better, but it feels like it's tearing us apart." Jamal didn't know how to respond. He had thought the money would solve their problems, but instead, it seemed to be creating new ones. The life-altering decision they had made was starting to unravel the very fabric of their lives. "I know," he said quietly, "but we're in too deep now. We can't go back." The community where Jamal and Tanya lived was tight-knit. Neighbors looked out for one another, children played in the shared green spaces, and weekend cookouts were a neighborhood tradition. But as the rumors about Jamal and Tanya's sudden fortune continued to swirl, the atmosphere began to change. At first it was just subtle shifts. People who used to stop and chat at the corner store now offered only quick nods before turning away. Old friends hesitated before making eye contact, as if weighing whether or not to ask the questions they were dying to know the answers to. Even Marcus noticed it. His usual group of friends at school seemed distant, their joking camaraderie replaced by awkward silence. The gossip spread quickly, taking on a life of its own. Some claimed that Jamal had made a shady business deal, others that Tanya had come into an inheritance from a long-lost relative. But the most persistent rumor, the one that stuck like glue, was that they had won the lottery and were hiding the windfall. But despite the ups and downs, one thing was clear: the press conference had shifted the narrative. The rumors began to die down, and while the attention didn't disappear overnight, Jamal and Tanya felt a sense of relief. For the first time in months, they weren't hiding. They were in control. 4. The final twist. Just as Jamal and Tanya began to settle into their new reality, life threw them one final, unexpected curveball. One evening, a few weeks after the press conference, Jamal received a phone call from a number he didn't recognize. Hesitant at first, he answered, expecting it to be another reporter or curious neighbor. But instead, the voice on the other end of the line was calm, professional. "Mr. Lewis, this is Officer Ramirez from the local police department. I'm calling in regard to the threats your family has received. We've been investigating the situation, and we believe we've identified the individual responsible." Jamal's heart skipped a beat. You found them." Yes, sir. We've apprehended a man named Robert Johnson. He's known to have a criminal history and has been linked to several extortion attempts in the area. We found evidence in his possession that ties him to the notes you received. He's been arrested and will be facing charges. Jamal felt a rush of relief so powerful that it nearly knocked him off his feet. The man who had been threatening his family, the man who had kept them living in fear, was finally behind bars. "Thank you," Jamal said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much." As he hung up the phone, a sense of peace washed over him. The danger had passed, and for the first time since finding the lottery ticket, Jamal felt truly free. 5. A new beginning. In the months that followed, Jamal and Tanya slowly began to rebuild their lives. They used their winnings wisely, investing in their children's futures and giving back to the community that had been their home for so many years. They made donations to local charities, supported the neighborhood school, and helped fund projects that improved the lives of those around them. Why else would they be upgrading everything? Mrs. Jenkins said one afternoon at the local beauty salon, her voice a mix of envy and suspicion. "New car, new tools. I heard they're even looking at property outside of town. If you ask me, they're planning to pack up and leave us all behind." It didn't take long before the whispers grew louder. People who had once been supportive and friendly started to turn cold. The sense of community that Jamal and Tanya had cherished for so many years was unraveling, replaced by resentment and suspicion. It was as if their sudden change in fortune had drawn a line between them and everyone else, and no one was quite sure which side to stand on. 2. A fractured friendship. Jamal felt the shift most acutely when he ran into his old friend, Mike, at the local barbershop one Saturday morning. Mike had been his closest confidant since high school, the guy he called when he needed a sounding board or just someone to grab a beer with. They had been through thick and thin together, from losing their first jobs to celebrating the birth of their kids. If there was one person Jamal thought would never doubt him, it was Mike. But that day, something was different. As they sat in the barbershop's worn-out leather chairs, the familiar scent of aftershave filling the air, Jamal noticed the guarded look in Mike's eyes, the way he shifted uncomfortably as they made small talk. "Been hearing things, Jamal," Mike said finally, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "People saying you came into some big money. That true?" Jamal tensed. He had been dreading this conversation for weeks, knowing that once Mike asked, there would be no easy way to dodge the question. Still, he forced a smile, trying to keep his voice light. "Man, you know how people talk," Jamal replied, shrugging. "Tanya and I have just been saving up, trying to make some improvements around the house. Nothing big." But Mike didn't look convinced. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Look, I get it if you don't want to share, but you and we've been through a lot. If you came into some money, why keep it a secret? People are talking, Jamal. They're saying you're about to up and leave. Is that true?" Jamal felt a pang of guilt twist in his gut. He wanted to tell Mike the truth, to explain why they had kept the news under wraps, but he couldn't risk it. Not now, not when the stakes were so high. "Mike, I promise you, whatever people are saying, it's not like that," Jamal said quietly. "We're just trying to keep things steady, for the kids, you know." Mike nodded slowly, but the hurt in his eyes was unmistakable. "Yeah, I get it. Just don't forget where you came from, man. Don't forget the people who were there when you didn't have a dime to your name." Jamal swallowed hard, feeling the weight of Mike's words settle on his shoulders like a heavy burden. He nodded, offering a tight smile, but as he left the barbershop that day, he knew their friendship would never be the same. 3. Family tensions boil over. As tensions mounted in the community, things at home were beginning to unravel as well. Marcus, who had sensed something was off for weeks, finally reached his breaking point one evening. The family was gathered around the dinner table, eating in strained silence, when Marcus suddenly slammed his fork down, making everyone jump. "Enough already," he shouted, his face flushed with anger. "What's going on? Everyone at school is talking about us. People keep asking if we're rich now, if we're gonna move, and you guys won't tell me anything. What's the big secret?" Jamal and Tanya exchanged a worried glance. They had wanted to keep the kids out of it for as long as possible, but Marcus's frustration was palpable. He was old enough to know something was wrong, and keeping him in the dark was only making things worse. "Marcus, calm down," Tanya said gently, reaching out to him. But Marcus pulled back, his eyes blazing. "No, I'm tired of being calm. You think I don't notice how weird everyone's been acting? You think I don't see you two whispering all the time? Just tell me the truth for once." Jamal took a deep breath, his heart aching at the sight of his son's pain. "Marcus, we didn't want to keep this from you," he said quietly. "But we did come into some money. We're trying to figure things out, how to handle it without causing problems. We didn't want you to worry." Marcus stared at him, disbelief mingling with anger. "So it's true. You're rich now. How much?" "It's a lot," Jamal admitted, choosing his words carefully. "But that doesn't mean things have to change for us. We're still the same family, living in the same house. We just want to make sure we do this right." But Marcus wasn't listening. He pushed back from the table, his face a mask of betrayal. "You should have told me," he said, his voice shaking. "You should have trusted me." With that, he stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Jamal and Tanya sitting in stunned silence. For a long moment, they didn't move, the reality of their son's anger hitting them like a physical blow. The money was supposed to help them, to make life easier, but instead, it felt like it was tearing their family apart. 4. The threats begin. As if the internal strain wasn't enough, a new and even more sinister development reared its head. One afternoon, Tanya found an envelope stuffed into their mailbox. There was no return address, just her name scrawled in jagged letters across the front. Frowning, she opened it, expecting another piece of junk mail or maybe a misplaced bill. But what she found inside made her blood run cold. The note was written in messy, almost frantic handwriting. "You think you can hide. We know you're sitting on millions. If you don't want to lose it all, you'd better start sharing. Don't test us." Tanya felt her heart hammering in her chest as she read the words again, disbelief and fear flooding her senses. Someone knew. Someone outside the community had found out. And now, they were being threatened. She called Jamal immediately, her voice trembling as she told him about the note. He raced home from work, his face pale as he held the crumpled piece of paper in his hands. "This is bad, Tanya," he murmured, his voice low and tense. "If someone's willing to make threats, they might do more than just send notes." "We need to go to the police," Tanya said, her voice shaking. "We need to protect the kids." But Jamal shook his head. "If we go to the cops, it'll all come out. The trust, the money, everything. We'll be front-page news, and then everyone will know. We'll be even bigger targets." They were trapped. The money that had once seemed like a blessing was now a curse, drawing danger and suspicion from every corner. And as they stared at the threatening note, a terrible realization settled over them. They had thought they could keep the secret, control the fallout. But now it was spiraling out of control, and there was no telling how far it would go, or who would be caught in the crossfire. The days following the threat left Jamal and Tanya in a state of perpetual anxiety. They hadn't received another note, but the fear lingered, creeping into every corner of their lives. Jamal installed security cameras around the house and started keeping a baseball bat by the front door. Tanya took different routes home from work each day, scanning the streets for anything suspicious. They were living in a constant state of high alert, their nerves frayed, their patience wearing thin. The money, which had once seemed like a gift from the heavens, had turned their lives upside down. No matter what they did to protect themselves, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that someone, somewhere, was waiting to strike. The paranoia was suffocating. One evening, after the kids were in bed, Jamal and Tanya sat together on the couch, the weight of everything pressing down on them. They had barely spoken in days, both too consumed by their own fears and frustrations to find the words. "We can't keep living like this," Tanya said quietly, her voice breaking the silence. "I don't know how much more I can take, Jamal. The threats, the fear, it's too much." Jamal nodded, his jaw clenched. He knew she was right. They had reached a breaking point, and something had to change. But what? They couldn't simply walk away from the money. It was their future, their chance to give their children a better life. Yet, the cost of keeping it felt too high. "I've been thinking," Jamal said, his voice rough with exhaustion. Maybe we should go public." Tanya's eyes widened in shock. "Public? Are you serious? After everything we've done to keep this quiet?" "I know," Jamal said, running a hand over his face. "But think about it. We've tried hiding, we've tried keeping it under wraps, and it's only made things worse. Maybe if we come forward, if we're open about it, we can control the narrative. Stop the rumors. Stop the threats." Tanya sat in stunned silence for a long moment, turning his words over in her mind. The idea terrified her. Going public meant exposing themselves to even more scrutiny, more judgment. But at the same time, maybe Jamal was right. Maybe by hiding, they had only made themselves bigger targets. "What about the kids?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "What will this do to them?" "We'll protect them," Jamal said firmly. "We'll explain everything. But if we keep living like this, if we keep trying to hide, it's only going to get worse." Tanya swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about their family, their future. And as much as the thought of going public scared her, the thought of living in constant fear scared her even more. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I don't think we have a choice." 2. The announcement. The next morning, Jamal and Tanya made the most difficult decision of their lives. They would go public with the lottery win. They met with their lawyer, Monica Reyes, to discuss the best way to handle the announcement. Monica advised them to hold a press conference, not only to explain their situation, but to make it clear that they were taking steps to protect their family's privacy moving forward. "The sooner you address this head-on, the better," Monica said, her tone professional but sympathetic. "The media will swarm at first, but if you handle it right, the attention will die down eventually. Just be honest. Control the story before it controls you." The plan was set, but the anxiety lingered. Jamal and Tanya knew that once they stepped in front of the cameras, there would be no going back. They would be opening themselves up to public scrutiny in a way they had never experienced before. But they also knew that it was their only chance to take control of the situation, to stop living in fear. On the day of the press conference, they arrived at a modest community center, far from the glare of downtown. A small crowd of reporters had gathered, their cameras and microphones at the ready. Jamal and Tanya took a deep breath before stepping onto the stage, their hands clasped tightly together. Jamal cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "My name is Jamal Lewis, and this is my wife, Tanya. A few months ago, we found ourselves in an extraordinary situation, one that has changed our lives in ways we never imagined. We were fortunate enough to win a significant amount of money through the lottery, and while this has been a blessing, it has also come with challenges that we never anticipated." He paused, glancing at Tanya for support before continuing. "We've tried to keep this private, to protect our family and our children. But over the past few weeks, rumors have spread, and we've faced increasing pressure from our community and from outside sources. We've received threats, and we can no longer live in fear. So today, we're coming forward to set the record straight." Tanya squeezed his hand as she stepped forward to speak. "We want to be clear that our priority is, and always will be, our family's safety and well-being. We've taken steps to ensure that our financial situation is managed responsibly, and we ask for privacy as we continue to navigate this new chapter in our lives. We are not leaving our community. We are not abandoning the life we've built. We simply want to move forward with integrity and peace." The room was silent for a moment as the reporters processed the statement. Then, the questions came in a rapid-fire barrage. Will you be moving? How much money did you win? What's your plan for the future? Jamal and Tanya answered the questions as best they could, sticking to the advice Monica had given them. Stay calm, stay clear, and most importantly, protect their family's privacy. After what felt like an eternity, the press conference ended, and they were ushered out of the building, leaving the chaos behind them. 3. The community reacts. In the days that followed the press conference, the reaction from the community was swift and varied. Some people were supportive, offering words of congratulations and understanding. Others were less forgiving, still harboring resentment over the couple's secrecy and sudden change in fortune. Jamal noticed the shift almost immediately. Some neighbors who had once been cold and distant began to warm up again, offering friendly waves and small talk. Others, however, remained suspicious, their eyes still full of judgment. At school, Tanya faced a mixed reception from her colleagues. Some of them admired her for coming forward, acknowledging the courage it took to speak out. But others, especially those who had been most vocal in spreading rumors, kept their distance, clearly uncomfortable with the entire situation. Even Marcus and Mia felt the ripple effects at school. Marcus, who had been angry and distant, slowly began to understand why his parents had kept the secret, and while he still struggled with the attention the family was receiving, he no longer felt betrayed. Mia, on the other hand, was blissfully unaware of the details, too young to fully grasp the complexities of their situation.